Net Zero podcast. We're at Brewdog Waterloo, Briam, sustainable building, lots of sustainable construction materials. We thought we'd mix it up. We're with Geoff Curran. Geoff Curran is the founder of
Future Net Zero and Energy Live News. Well, actually, I'm a co-founder because otherwise Sumit will be very upset. Sumit, I love you, darling.
So we're here to talk net zero, sustainability. People have had questions from the previous podcast about how we went about things with direct, indirect questions. There are a lot of people that are very misinformed with net zero. Everyone has an opinion on it, and Geoff has lots of opinions. So let's just jump straight in. Geoff, so how did you get into sustainability, net zero, this kind of space?
Okay, so this goes back a long way. So really getting into net zero, we launched futurenetzero.com back in 2020, just before the pandemic.
Okay.
However, we have to go way, way back. So my business partner is a guy called Sumit Bose. He's ex-BBC, and my brother used to be at the BBC. We were, and I got to know him, and I wanted to get out of corporate life. I wanted to do something very different.
What corporate life was that then?
Lots of sales stuff,
Okay.
software, big ticket stuff, which is good fun, but just needed to get out of it. I wanted to be able to look back and go, I'd actually created something for myself.
Okay.
And I think that's down to my dad was a plumber.
Okay.
And you can look at me and look at my hands and realise
You've really soft-looking hands,
I
Geoff.
got soft-looking hands. It's fair to say I've never done a hard day's work in my life.
Okay.
Anyway, let's go back. Energy Live News. So me and Sumit got together. We were meant to be working a couple of days a week. And effectively, we got sucked into one another's worlds where we were doing sort of video production.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, I went on an Arsenal away trip to Europe. I told you I was going to mention Arsenal.
He's brought Arsenal there.
I had to bring Arsenal up. So we're probably somewhere like Bayer Leverkusen or somewhere like that. And we're driven. And I was chatting to a friend called Dan. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm doing this thing called energy risk management. And I said, what's that all about? And he explained it. It was quite sophisticated, quite complicated.
Okay.
I said, how do you sell that? And he goes, well, I've got a slide deck of 50 slides. I went, oh my God, does anyone actually go for it? And he went, yeah. So I said, okay, you should be down to 10 or 15 slides. And he said, I can't do that. I said, look, I'll help you. So we got in, and then we got chatting, and he goes, you do video stuff? I said, yeah. I'd like to video my managing director. And so we agreed a deal. And then, of course, Git that he was, lovely guy now in America, he said, oh, by the way, I've got some customers that are coming now. I want you to do those as well. So we ended up doing a load of testimonials. He also got a bunch of suppliers in, energy suppliers, and he got them to pay for the shoot. So if I had known this, I would have charged him a lot more money. Anyway, I had to deliver all of these videos, and it was to a show called The Energy Show. And I realised there's a lot of money within energy. So I said to Sumit, we should be doing a news thing. He said, no, it's really expensive to do. And I said, no, this is a good place to be. And then the next year we went back and it was bigger. And I said, right, we've definitely got to do it. So Energy Live News was formed out of us doing some video work for people in the energy industry.
Okay.
And from there, and then I had to blackmail him to do it though. So I basically had a friend of mine committed suicide, and I spent all night thinking about what I needed to do. So I turned around to him the next day and said, right, mate of mine committed suicide. We need to do this. Otherwise, I'm going to go and do it on my own.
Damn, what a sales line that is.
It's great, isn't it?
It's not a disease. It's not going to kill you. It's my friend's committed suicide.
Yeah.
Tragic, bad.
Yeah.
Life is too short.
I want to make a positive out of it.
Fine. Cool.
So the interest, sorry, go on. You ask a question.
So with that, obviously from one side you look at it as a great opportunity for a news channel, etc.
Yeah.
So what was the sort of the need? So did you see, well, actually in this energy space, there is an opportunity here to create a news element for them because there isn't enough people doing it, or?
Well, there already were people doing it, but they were doing it in a really old-fashioned way. So they're either doing trade and technical titles, the sort of monthlies that you'd get. Some energy news was coming out in the main newspapers. But we had a vision of it was mainly for large energy users who are spending hundreds of thousands to millions to hundreds of millions. I mean, think of the biggest retailer in this country. Their energy bill at the moment is billions. Okay, or billion. So if you can save 10% of that, that's a lot of money.
A lot of money, yeah, of course.
Yeah, straight on the bottom line.
Okay.
But also, if you're saving energy, you're decarbonising as well. Okay,
Okay.
though people didn't. It was much more around cost and price.
So
etc.
so it was less decarbonising at that point.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So when we set up Energy Live News, we did 4 things. Lots of policy and legislation. There was a thing about energy efficiency. It was about prices and procurement and understanding that process. And then there was this thing around sustainability, green agenda. So even back then, it was beginning to become a thing.
Okay.
But it's really funny. Net zero as a term sort of started to be seen around 16, 17, 18. And
Okay.
in 2019, I had a sort of a year where not particularly well, had an operation, my father died, so I wasn't in the business much, and it gave me an opportunity to really sit back and go, where should we be taking the business?
Right. Okay.
And so, and then Sumit had been working with a large customer, a company called Schneider Electric, you may well have
we
heard
know
of.
Schneider, yeah.
So Schneider are probably in the top 10, if not certainly the top 25 most sustainable companies in the world.
Okay.
They do some really cool stuff.
Okay.
And all they talked about at this big event that they were doing was net zero. And that was
Right.
2019.
Right. Okay.
And so we went, right. So we carried on with Energy Live News because it's a legacy brand and it's a great brand, does what it does. But Future Net Zero, we wanted to set up. And it started much more as a sort of news and feature site, but we're just about to revamp it. So it's much more about net zero in action.
So you were a newbie.
Yeah, totally.
You were a fresh newbie
absolutely.
to, like a lot of people with net zero
Yes.
and talking about reducing carbon.
Absolutely.
So you've obviously learned a few things along the way, even though your role is to put people that know what they're talking about
Yeah.
in a room or providing you with the information for the news.
So Sumit and I are communicators, really.
Yeah.
Okay, we're some people will say we don't listen very well. That's probably true. But actually, we probably listen better than a lot of people think. He's a journalist, so he does have to listen. And actually, I'm commercial, so I tend to have to ask lots of people what are they looking to, when they work with us, what do they want? Okay. And then obviously we try to fit around what they're after.
Right.
You probably do a very similar thing with your business.
So what's interesting is one of my questions is, do you think the UK is pressing too hard on net zero? For you is actually because if you watch the news, depending on what news channel, they're all different. They seem to think the government have gone soft the last 6 months.
Yep.
I know if you speak to the air source heat pump boys, they're jumping up and down at the moment because I think I don't know if they're scrapping grants, but things aren't as firm as they should be.
Yep.
But then your sort of proof, I suppose, is the demand for energy news and your event space. So it's growing.
It's interesting. We had the Energy Live News in particular went ballistic last year on our Google figures. So and let's be frank, when energy costs go right up, then people start thinking about saving it. Okay, so net zero is all about saving carbon, reducing your carbon impact, but that's really about reducing energy. Okay, so I sit at home in a 4-bedroom house, and last year, and I think I'm reasonably well off, even I was shutting doors, turning the heat off in particular rooms, and that's just from a personal perspective. If you're a company that's got a manufacturer, your energy let's say you were spending $250,000. Well, last year or the year before, your $250,000 went to maybe $750,000. So that's $500,000 straight off your bottom line. All right. So you're going to start looking at ways of being much more efficient and being able to bring that down. Okay. So now you start looking at, okay, so I've got motors in my manufacturing process. I need to look at variable speed drives because they will definitely save me 25 to 40%.
What about if they cost 5 times the price to put in?
Well, but then you determine obviously how. Again, there's a return on investment argument, but that return on investment argument, which might have been 5 years, once your energy prices go up by 3,
it
brings
comes down
right
significantly.
Yeah,
it does.
And the difficulty with a lot of businesses, it is difficult because most businesses work on a return on investment argument of 3 years. Okay, well, solar on top of your warehouse was probably 10 to 12 years, and with energy prices going up, still 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Okay?
If you had solar put in 10 years ago, I think we've just done a really big wine vineyard called Chilworth Manor, and speaking to the owner, he had these solar panels put in.
Why don't I get invited to that?
He had these solar panels put in 2012.
Yeah.
When he was part of the scheme where you get.
Oh yeah, the fits.
He got paid back, and he's still getting money back from the government.
Yeah.
So it basically his carbon is he pays no electricity, and he lives in a 13,000 square foot house. Yeah. It's huge.
Yeah.
But then panels were worthwhile then, whereas now I think. If you invest now, they're expensive. The payback isn't as good. But if energy does continue to rise, you're going to be your payback it'll drop significantly.
Well, actually, there are a couple of arguments there. So one, solar panels have definitely come down in price. So
correct, they have.
The reason why FITs or feed-in tariffs are not around anymore is that the government's all about starting the market, and once the market can then scale,
step back,
prices will come down, and therefore it makes it easier. So that's fine. If you haven't got any money, if you're a company that hasn't got any money, then you need to look at getting it financed. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of opportunities now with finance. So there's a lot of money awash in this world. Okay, whatever anyone says, there is loads of money. There are loads of investment companies. There are loads of VCs that are looking for opportunities. Mm-hmm. If there are things called PPAs, power purchase agreements. Okay. So there are now companies looking at creating. They will put the solar on your roof, and they will create a PPA, which you then basically have to sign up for. Mm-hmm. But you're getting cheaper energy, and you're also effectively using renewable. Now, it may not be enough for all of your energy needs, but it'll certainly be a significant proportion.
I suppose if you have that and you are a business, if you're buying from, I think, EDF, I think that a large portion of their electricity is renewable energy.
They will call it low carbon. And the reason they'll call it low carbon is obviously I'm
going to like this answer. I'm really going to like this answer.
They are going to be using, they'll be potentially using wind and solar, etc. But they're also using nuclear. So nuclear is low carbon. Now, not everyone thinks that nuclear is such a good thing around net zero. But if you want net zero, nuclear is probably part of the story. What people don't realise is the complexity of the energy system in this country. So if you... so when you've probably been on a motorway, in fact, the M1 between Loughborough and Nottingham, you'll go past a massive, great power station. Okay,
I know the one. I know the one. I've actually driven. You can drive right near it.
Ratcliffe. Okay, I think it's owned by a bit of Eon, or a company that came out of Eon. Those cooling towers were there because obviously when you were burning coal or gas, then you need to cool. Okay. But that produces the electricity. So what they do, if you've ever been to a power station, you should go to a power station. You ever been to one?
No.
Right, I will try and get you into a power station. Okay. They're really cool places to go. It's a bit like a James Bond set. Okay. Go into the control rooms. They're really very funky, especially if you go to an older one because it's like 60s, 70s sort of thing.
I'm thinking like old dials, like old meter dials.
Probably less so now, but if they've got an old control room, it's definitely worth being taken into. But they're really cool because they have these massive, great turbines. And these turbines have got lots of blades, and they literally, the gap between the end of the blade and the casing is a millimetre or two.
Wow.
And then these things get spun round, and that's what produces the electricity.
I'm with you.
Okay. They're and I've seen a turbine being replaced, and I did talk about, and you see the old blades, and they are very worn, and you sort of think, well, it's just air going through. But that air eventually is a bit like
it's high speed,
etc. So power station, but we're in Brewdog, aren't we here? Yeah. Good old Brewdog. I'll give them a nice plug. I don't think they need one.
They don't.
But this building's massive, okay, and it's BREEAM and all those sort of things. But it's still, we're sitting here with lights. There's heat or HVAC. People come here in the winter or the summer. In the winter, they want to be heated, and in the summer, they want to be cooled. Okay, that's all energy. The lights are energy, and what people forget is if energy goes off in London today and doesn't come around for 2 days, all the businesses are not taking any money because payments are all done electronically now. You might be able to take a bit of cash, but then your problem is you're probably not producing any coffee because the coffee machine is all electrified, and your pumps are probably electrified, so you're not getting any beer, and you're not producing any food unless, if the gas hasn't gone out, you might be able to then boil some water and you might be able to still do some cooking. We live in a society that is not medieval And that's because we have an energy system which enables us that when we get in at 5, 6 o'clock, at 7 o'clock, we can go and turn the kettle on, and everyone else is doing that. So these big power stations came about because you need what is called base load.
Okay.
Wind and solar don't necessarily give you that. They're much more intermittent. And that's why batteries are a big thing around solar and wind.
So a friend of mine's got a business, and it's come out of nowhere, really. He's big in the sector, lots of contacts, etc., etc. So he's just done a deal with the Korean government. So his job is,
Which one, south or north?
The south. The south. He's done a deal with Samsung. So what he does is he's got 3 in the UK at the moment. He has fields full of batteries in containers.
Yep.
Lots of little air conditioning units that hopefully we'll be putting in them soon to cool them down.
Yep.
And this sounds nuts. I just don't get it. You will get this. He buys electricity at night from the government.
Yeah, because it's cheap.
Because it's cheap. He stores it, and then he resells it back.
Absolutely.
What?
That's how hydro works. If you want to know how, so if you ever,
So he sells it back to the government.
yeah,
Because at night there's such a surplus.
yeah,
They will just put it into the ground and it will just be distinguished.
yeah.
So he buys it, he stores it, and he sells it, and he's got queues of investors.
Yeah.
Well, his Korean government are invested.
Yeah.
Because it's a lovely margin, because it's consistent, and we will always need the energy.
Yeah.
So it sounds nuts. The scary thing is, though, which...
Right, so you need to understand, so these power stations that exist, these big ones, and then the small solar farms you see in the wind turbines, they all feed into what is called the national grid.
Yeah.
And then the national grid goes out to the cable companies, which are the DNOs, distributed network operators.
Yeah.
And they're people like UK Power Networks, Western Power Distribution, Electricity Northwest, etc. There's loads of the SSE networks, Scottish Power Networks. There's loads of them. There's about 18 of them, whatever. And those cables go to businesses and homes.
Yeah.
Okay. So normally when you have a power cut at your home, it's normally the DNO's issue.
I see.
But the national grid sends all of this, and there's a national grid for gas as well. It's a bit easier because it's gas. But electricity, so there's all of these cables, pylons, wires that feed all of that around. So, and of course there is efficiency issues on that, because if you've done any chemistry or physics, as the energy goes through the wires, there's a certain amount of degradation.
In motors, you call it slip factor.
Yeah.
The energy
this is
wasted,
the engineer coming out now.
The energy that's wasted to get the motor running, you have a slip factor. So you say that, so it kind of makes sense. If you're a great big building, I don't know, even like Waterloo train station, why haven't they got, well, maybe it's coming, why wouldn't they just have an on-site battery storage that buys electricity at night and either resells it or redistributes it? Or is that something which potentially is something which could be up and coming in the next sort of 10 years?
Potentially, but the thing is, those batteries probably don't store as much energy as you think. Okay. So
you need space.
You need a lot. So you need space. Okay. We're not far from. I came into Blackfriars Station. So Blackfriars Station is really interesting. So when they redeveloped it about 10 years ago, they put solar panels on the top. So if you actually look at Blackfriars Bridge, you'll see the solar panels. It's amazing. It's such a really cool thing. But that energy that's been created is not as much as you think.
I see.
So if you've got a warehouse and let's say, X is the amount of energy you need to run that warehouse, and you put solar on top of it, you're probably only going to produce somewhere between 15 and 30% of your actual electricity needs from the solar. So
I see.
So that's the other thing is, like, you'll see a solar farm in a field. So there's
a huge one near us in East Grinstead, and I mean, you're talking like 1,000 acres of solar, and it's like...
But it might only be able to do 3,000 homes or something like that, okay? The other problem is that's now not farmland. Okay? So we've also got to feed a whole load of people around this world. So there's a real... I mean, probably the coolest James Bond thing I saw was when we were in Vegas for Sumit's milestone birthday about 5-6 years ago. And we weren't doing Vegas. We did Vegas, but we didn't do Vegas. We were doing Death Valley. We did the Sequoia Forest. We did a road trip. And when we were coming back into Vegas, all I remember is seeing this massive big column with bloody great big mirrors on it. I knew I shouldn't have sworn. Sorry, my apologies, Ben. The producer's now wincing. And then there's all these solar panels around it, and it just looked like a James Bond field.
Really?
It was amazing. I mean, it was really cool, and it's in the middle of a desert.
If it's in Vegas, it's probably powering just like one casino level.
Yeah, absolutely. So we go back to what I was saying earlier. People expect a certain level of society and energy effectively enables society. Without energy, you don't have, you know, if you think of windmills where you used to take the wheat and produce flour, which could then create bread, that was using wind technology, okay? But apart from that, you used to use fire, and then you had candles for light.
Of course.
We don't have that anymore because we have this amazing energy system. But if you all want to give it up, then that's great. We'll have a much more net zero world. But I think most people don't want to give stuff like that up.
Yeah, I see.
Okay, so
I am under that pretense that, like, you know, if it all goes tragically wrong, I'm quite happy to have a diesel burner in my house, and I can
so
go
that's not
off
very net
grid.
zero, is it?
No, it's not. No, this, but that's in a lot of people's. Because you turn off the electricity grid, you're pretty much you're done, right?
Yeah.
What's interesting what you're saying. So obviously know a bit about HVAC. So the HVAC we get into, our industry is driven by carbon savings, right, and lower carbon products.
Yep.
So refrigerants now, they need to be low GWP, global warming potential. My argument, a lot of engineers' arguments are, well, if you're putting in a product with a lower GWP, fantastic, but sometimes the design is a little backwards. I'm not going to use the word stupidity. I am going to use the word stupidity. But basically, what tends to happen is you tick the box with a low GWP, but your units are less efficient.
Okay.
And then it goes back to, because which I'm getting from what you've said, and it is common sense, but we seem to forget this, it's the attitude. Our attitudes need to change of, instead of leaving doors open and lights on and living in a society where energy is cheap, if we can accept that energy, whether it's going to be gas or electric, isn't going to get any cheaper, change your attitude to consume less as such. So with us, it's like, well, if the equipment does have a higher GWP number, but the efficiency is better, it's like you need to go for that. The challenge that we have is when you're going from just carbon points, the carbon point thing wins. And that's the challenge that we have, because manufacturers have jumped on this now. So I had a conversation with someone before you got here today where R290 is a propane. It's got a GWP of 3. It's a natural refrigerant. It's a propane. It's a potential bomb, right? A lot of manufacturers have gone, cool, let's do propane. Let's just put propane in all our units and convert them all but they're really inefficient. Propane is less efficient than the current refrigerants. But that will go in because they're, woohoo, we're slightly green. The unit's going to consume more electricity. So it's like, damn, stupidity isn't, is common. Because there's a rush for coming off gas, isn't there?
Well, gas is a transition fuel. And ultimately we do need to move away from it.
Do you have a gas boiler?
Of course I've got a gas boiler.
If I was to say to you, and this is like... if I was to say to you, your gas boiler's failed, well, you tell me the gas boiler's failed, I can give you a gas boiler which is 20% more efficient and it will cost you a couple of grand. Or I can give you an air source heat pump, which is very efficient, 1 to 4 COP, but it's going to cost you about 10K. Which one are you going for?
Yeah. Well, there is no... And the other problem is I have a house that thankfully is fairly new, 2005
so
built.
It's super insulated.
Super insulated. But the difficulty is it still wasn't designed for an air source or ground heat pump. Okay, it was designed for a gas boiler. So I got radiators, okay, and it is pretty efficient. I must admit, it never really gets under 18 degrees in my house. Well, unless you're in the loft room, and then it's then it's freezing. Ben's winced again.
Bloody's okay. Bloody Mary. I suppose the only thing, looking at it, if they wanted to go draconian, is for you to have to go air source and change all the radiators. Would be a case of if you wanted to sell it and the banks wouldn't lend money on an older property without the because I know landlords now you have to have a minimum. I think it's got to be D?
C or B.
D, no, it's D, but there were talks of B. You're not renting out your property without having minimum efficiency, so that's the only force that they to drive it.
I think a lot of it's going to be driven by compliance or policy or legislation, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so. If you look at, there's a thing called SECR, Streamline Energy and Carbon Reporting. And in this country, it's only for companies that have got 250 plus employees or £25 million turnover or something like balance sheet of 36 million.
Okay.
I don't have to worry about it, thankfully. There's almost a certainty that the government will bring that down to smaller companies. So maybe 100 employees.
Okay.
So that will then drive that. I mean, carbon reporting, carbon accounting, there's a whole big, we do our own carbon reporting. Scope 1 and Scope 2 are very easy because it's really about the energy you use.
Is this ESG sort of scoping, 1 and 2?
Well, yes.
Scope 3 is more embodied carbon.
Scope 3 is much more indirect. So I'll give you an example. We run events.
It's the same. Okay.
So when we run an event, we should pick up the gas and electricity use of the day because it's effectively us using it. So we will ask the venue, what was our use of kilowatt hours? Now, invariably, they're not going to go, oh, we're going to really spend a lot of time. So what we do is to say, look, we're using it for a day. So just give us a day of the energy from the whole year. It's a fairly easy thing to do. And actually, under the UN Race to Zero, you're meant to be looking at it in a way that's timely and easy to do. So people get a bit too bogged down with thinking, oh, I've got to really get to grips with it totally. You don't have to. You just got to get an idea. Okay. But so last year we did an event, we had 1,500 delegates turn up. They're all coming, and effectively they're not coming unless it's our event. So we feel like we have to pick up the carbon, so report the carbon of those people coming. Okay. However, most of them are from businesses. So am I meant to be doing half and half? So half with businesses, half with ourselves. I pick up the whole lot because it's just easier. But also what we're doing is we're doing pretty much a survey. So of that 1,500, we might get 100 that say, I've come 200 miles, I've come 2 miles, I walked, I took a car, whatever. It's all an estimate.
I'm a Scope 3 guy. That I love indirect. So when we quote for work, they want 1 and 2 ticked. So low carbon products. Okay. Mitzi Electric, Ben's going to put it up on the screen. They've done something which others are slowly following. So every product has an embodied carbon calculation.
That's good.
The type of product, the capacity, the weight, the breakdown of 90% of it, the service life, but it also talks about the factory it was made in.
Oh, okay.
And how much carbon that produces. So it gives you a figure, Scope 3.
Yeah.
Bit like what you just said with people going to your event. For me, if we're putting in a product which is efficient, if you're having to have 3 or 4 crane lifts, you're destroying your. How much? They're all diesel. And then where do people live? Okay, so you're based in Manchester and you're doing a job in London. Sounds really efficient. So Scope 3 is like, for me, that's the sensible way of looking at things. So you're a company up north, you're travelling. How much carbon are you actually producing? The scary thing is for me, because we're not big enough for it, but it's going to come to the smaller businesses, which I believe. We're going to have to give evidence for that to potentially win work. Because if you're a really bad emitter...
Already happening. Okay, so if you're doing a public sector contract that's 5 million and above, you have to have carbon. You need to report on your carbon, and you need to show what you're doing around your carbon impact. Okay, and
because we signed up to ESG. We've got other carbon organisations we're part of. But I mean per project basis. So as in, if we're going to do a project in your house to replace the boiler for an air source heat pump, you get 5 companies up. There might be legislation to say, well, actually stop looking at the cost because Subcool, their carbon to do this project is a lot less. They're fully electric. You kind of need to, or if it was your an office and you're like, well, if we use this company which is cheaper, it's going to make our carbon score look worse.
No, it's difficult. It's really difficult, and the trouble is we're still, it's a juggle between price and carbon to an extent.
Well, banks.
I think
you know more. This is something that I learned recently. So I'll use the word NatWest because the person at the event was from NatWest. But the banks love to lend more money to people for going down the BREEAM route.
Absolutely, and because so for a bank, their biggest carbon impact is not Scope 1 and 2; it's Scope 3, because their money gets utilised by companies. All right. So one of their big issues is. And I'm not saying it's NatWest, it could be, but you think of all the
banks lend the money.
All the banks have got money invested in oil and gas companies, and they're the biggest carbon companies out there.
So offsetting.
So offsetting's a pile of doo-doo.
I love it. Love the statement. Okay. Offsetting meaning they're then giving the money to people that are using it in the low carbon route?
The difficult with carbon offsetting is it's a bit of a wild west out there. Okay, so... Someone will say, we're planting a load of trees. Okay.
You're jumping ahead, but I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
Do you know that they're planting those trees? And also trees, there's they worked out that you would, I think, and this may be apocryphal, and I do apologise for anyone. I love picking up apocryphal stories. But if you wanted to sort the world out, you would have to plant trees that covered all of the United States of America.
Okay.
Right? So if you think that we talk about...
Have you heard the statement that I think the Amazon rainforest like removes like a quarter of the carbon that's produced in the world? Something like that?
Well, it doesn't help that we're cutting it down.
It doesn't, deforestation. Yeah. That's what I think people seem to forget. Because mining for metals and the oils that are needed for some of these low energy products is deforest. We have to deforest it. We're killing forests.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, okay, we're removing the carbon, the best things to remove carbon, we're cutting down.
Yeah, well, we could really go into a whole long and...
So what I've got with deforestation and the destruction, my notes on this, they've remained throughout my net zero thing, is for reducing carbon, going the sustainability route, and batteries, cars, etc.
Yep.
We're mining for metals and oils. The use of hardwoods are going through the roof the more we build. Hydroelectricity, although is very green, it destroys masses. So there's a place in Xingu River has taken up 310 square miles of forest, and it's not even 20 years old, this thing. So it's kind of like, sounds a bit palm oil, we know that, and then cattle grazing. That's another thing, but I eat meat, so it's kind of like
you gotta be careful.
I'll wing that one, of course.
We all like a steak. Oh, maybe not everybody.
Not everyone. not everyone. Not everyone.
Okay, sorry. The meat eaters tend to like a steak. Yes, and it's not very. And by the way, it's not about the farting; it's about the belching. And the reason I can say that is that when we had Ed Davey as a speaker at one of our events, he was Minister for Energy at the time.
Yeah.
He was asked, so it's about cows farting, isn't it? It's one of the big problems. He went, no, actually, it's not about farting, it's about belching. So it's great to see an energy minister willing to use those words. We have film of it somewhere.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness. So, so do you think, I know I mentioned about the UK is 1%. So when I say about is the UK being pushed too hard, I think we kind of are and we're not. We're being pulled and pushed from all sort of angles. It's kind of why we're sitting down with you, because you see things slightly differently. Where is it a growing sector?
It will be with electric vehicles, because if you think that I don't know how many cars are on the road, 30 million, 40 million. There's a lot of cars and a lot of lorries that are out there. So when you look at the amount of diesel and petrol that's being used, you've effectively got to replace that with electric. Mm-hmm. So what they're saying is that national grid capacity has to probably double in the next.
So quick fire question, which a lot of people think is, how are we going to do that? We haven't got the grid for it.
So we haven't got the grid at the moment.
Okay.
No, that's right. So part of National Grid's mission is they're having to forecast ahead. So
by 2030?
Net zero. Well, we're meant to lose half our carbon by 2030. Okay, based on whatever the year back it was.
97.
Whatever
I think to get to 97 emissions by then, and
then 2050 is net zero, which is not that we're getting rid of carbon to zero, because that's not possible, but net zero where we're not putting anything in and out, basically. Okay. All right. So when you look at electric vehicles, seems like a great idea, but you're going to have to increase the capacity. That means the grid and the DNOs have got to pick up that. Okay, so think of every house. So I live in the suburbs. I have a garage. I can put a charger into a garage and I can have my car sitting in the garage or just outside, plugged away. Thank you very much. How's that going to happen in London? When you've got a car and you're in a flat?
I think there's lots of entrepreneurs out there. There's lamppost chargers.
Yeah, okay.
There's lamppost chargers.
Yeah, okay. It's a lovely idea, okay? But again, back to, you've got 3 cars on a road and there's 1 lamppost. Okay, you've got 3 sockets coming out. Vandalism, safety. You think of we live in a very health and safety conscious world. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you know what? I think the question is if you live in London, you shouldn't have a car.
Well, that is a very good, especially with with the amount of tube and buses, etc.
You shouldn't because that goes back to the attitude. Well, I do a lot of travelling, so I do need I've got a hybrid, and it does 55 to the gallon, so I'm pretty pleased with that.
But is the hybrid really working? Because you've basically got a battery sitting on top of a ICE and
a lot of people say they're a waste of time, but so is the battery really working? I don't know. It's a 2.2 litre. It's a 2 litre petrol. So a 2 litre petrol, in my eyes, will never do 55 to the gallon. I don't think if it was a diesel, yes. So
I got a diesel, so I'm
diesel,
doing about 45 to 50 on a 2 litre engine.
Yes.
And I do a lot of I mean, I must admit, I feel bad because I do a lot of miles, but invariably, look, I'm a salesman basically.
So
I have to go around and see people.
no different to me. You have to drive.
Yes.
Whereas if the attitude changes, if you live in London,
Yeah.
you could, and it's a bit like with when you look at electric cars and the miles are less. One
Yeah.
could say, do you even need to? Why do you need to do more than 300 miles per charge? And you sort of think, fair enough, because that's one of the arguments. That's always one of the arguments.
We're unusual. If you actually look at most car journeys, they are less than 20 miles.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got mum taking the kids to school, and then she's going to probably, not just the mum, it could be the dad, okay, or the carer. So if you look at who's taking the kids to school, that's a very small car run. And then they might be going to the shops or they might be doing a few jobs. But invariably, you look at, it's probably 20 miles in a day. Yeah, that should be done by, we should all have little milk floats from the 70s.
Yeah, well, it's nuts, isn't it? It was there before, wasn't it? Milk floats were all electric.
Yeah. And look at, I play golf, sadly.
Are they electric
and
caddies?
they're all electric buggies. Yeah. If you're having a buggy, I try to keep fit, so I carry
you
my
walk,
bag.
of course you walk.
Of course.
Yeah, you don't waste a. Yeah,
I do have the odd buggy. It's quite nice, especially if you're having a beer.
So the UK being 1% of emissions worldwide, do you think we are being? Because some when I sit on this fence, but if you look at China's quite all electric, but it's quite a scary place. Everything is very social credit-y, and everything is electric, and
I'm not getting involved in this conversation on the basis I don't want the Chinese authorities blacklisting me.
No, I'm not saying it in a negative word, but what I mean by that is, and again, it's speaking for the person that have these questions of, well, if I don't have a petrol car and my electricity prices go up, I'm having to pay more by default. You could say the argument, well, look at petrol prices because they all compete with each other and they put them up when they feel like. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I'm with Eon. So if their price goes up, I'm stuck for a couple. Well,
the difficulty you've got is that electric cars, when energy prices were low, were great because you could look at the lifetime value and go, right, electric vehicles 30,000, a petrol diesel car's 20,000. Yeah. So I'm having to pay 10,000 extra, but my energy prices or the money I need to put into that car will be less.
Yeah.
So therefore, there is a return on investment argument. Obviously, with energy prices going up, that makes it more difficult.
Yeah.
The difficulty I've got with the whole electric vehicle thing is...
at the moment, and it's the same with me, at the moment.
If you look at technology comes along and it's better. So if you look at mobile phones, they first were bricks, but the reason people used them was because they didn't have to be at home to use a phone or in an office. They could move them around. And now mobile phones, I sit here, and I don't know if the camera's working, but this has got more computing power than NASA had to put, the Apollo. Oh, by the way, I've just seen moonwalkers at the Light Room in St Pancras. It's amazing. Okay. Tom Hanks, definitely worth going. There you go. That's the Geoff Curran recommendation. Sad but true. But it's definitely worth going. But electric vehicles, in terms of technology, are not as good as a internal combustion engine because it takes 30 to 40 minutes to fill it up if you're on a service station, and that's with a fast charger. Yes, you can then do a trickle overnight, okay? But your range, so I have a diesel car, the range is something like 500 to 530 miles. Even a Tesla is looking at 250, and if you're absolutely pegging it down a motorway, you're probably going to lose some of that. Okay. So the difficulty you've got is I'm having to use a piece of technology that's not as good as before. And so therefore people are put off. Okay, people want to do the right thing. I do believe that most people want to do the right thing, but you've got to make it easy for them. So you talk about HVAC and HVAC needs to, old HVAC units get inefficient. Yeah. So you either replace it, is expensive, or there are some really quite cool sort of retrofit things you can do that do probably give you savings on energy of anything between 10 and 30%. So if you can't afford to change that HVAC unit, then put the retrofit unit in, because it's going to cost you hundreds of pounds and it's going to give you the return on investment within a year or two with no problems, and you are saving energy. Okay? But if you can afford to go to the more super duper new ones that are efficient, then go with that. But ultimately, we've got to make it easy for people. Okay? So living in a city is a damn sight easier for people to be more net zero, because they don't have to necessarily use a car, and they have to think. But I think there is a little bit of behaviour change. So I try and walk to my local shops. So I'm lucky I have shops at the bottom of my road, and I can go, I can buy, and I don't tend to stock up lots of things just because of my lifestyle.
Do you do that because you want to reduce your carbon footprint, or do you do that because you want to save some money? Or a bit of both.
It's probably a bit of both, but also
it's good cardiovascular activity.
It's absolutely
good for you.
Yeah. So probably my main reason is health up to a point, and also I don't like food waste. So I had a dad who was brought up in Northern Ireland, sort of during the Second World War. He used to hunt rabbits so he could eat. All right, and I never saw him leave a scrap on his dinner plate.
Not rabbit foot, surely.
Not rabbit. No, you'd have the whole rabbit.
What, even the feet?
Well, you'd probably cut the feet off.
Okay.
I don't believe that we're going down into a Jamie version.
But what you're saying, I think I'm like that as well. So any food that is wasted in our house, no meat, I'll eat the meat, because I'm like, an animal died for this, and you're just throwing it in the bin. So are you as brutal as that?
Okay, so you'll enjoy this. So I used to throw potato peelings away. So now I do my potato peelings, and I then cook them and I turn them into a mash, and that is religious now.
Potato peelings.
Potato peelings.
You can turn them into a mash.
Yeah.
What does it look like? Just brown.
It looks sort of browny, creamy. Yeah, and it's very edible.
How do you do it?
Good roughie.
How do you do it?
You just peel a bit extra, so you get a little bit of potato as well.
Look at this.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So your spuds are smaller, but you make mash out of it.
Yeah. And then broccoli. So people throw away the stem. That stem you can eat. Just cook it, and it's fine. Okay, eat the stem.
I don't know what it is with broccoli. I know this is a bit off topic. I don't know what it is with broccoli stems, but I just detest them. But they're actually the best part, aren't they?
Put them in the sauce if you have to. Come on, put gravy on them.
I was waiting for you to say you make broccoli mash.
No, I don't do. I don't do broccoli mash. No, but I'll probably chuck them in a Chinese or something.
So you're saying though is, again, if you've got it sounds ironic, but irony is everywhere in this day and age. If you are driving an electric vehicle and your attitude is pretty bad, that you are driving like a hooligan, like you stole it, and you're not, and you're not using your potato peels, and you're literally having you're buying 4 burgers and eating half of them because you don't like them and you're throwing them. Yeah. You're kind of contradicting a lot of things.
Absolutely, yeah. You run an electric vehicle because you want to be seen to be helping the planet, but then you're throwing away a load of food.
So that's where education is so poor on this subject, because we're a hateful.
I have a real problem with people like Greta. Okay,
I've got a question. Let
me go now.
Let me answer the question.
Right, go on.
Let's just let him sit there and feel it.
Okay, everybody, it's coming. Yeah. We're going Greta.
Countdown timer.
The year is 2050.
Yeah.
You're going to mention Greta because she likes flying on private planes, by the way. But the year is 2050, and Greta Thunberg is the world president.
Okay, that's great. But she's only going to be the world president because she's finally come up with some solutions. Okay, and at the moment, it's very easy to diss everybody, but she's not coming up with solutions. Greta, come up with some solutions. We'll have a chat.
So she's the world president, Geoff, and we are totally net zero.
Yeah.
She's taken the glory for it because she's stepped in.
I have no problems with that.
What does the world look like?
The world... God, if I'm cynical, I would say I'm not sure I'm necessarily going to see that totally happening. If you take a very holistic view of the world, okay, and the Earth, we are mere blips on this planet, okay? So if we're basically going to make ourselves extinct, okay, we're either going to have nuclear Armageddon or we are going to basically cook the world. But the world won't give a monkeys because the world will go and sort itself out. All right. So if you look at it from a purely, species, there were dinosaurs. They got killed by the meteorites coming along, and we would have been killed by the meteorites coming along. If Greta has got us to net zero by 2050, I'll be the first one to go. Well done. Okay. What we need, and I think this is where actually responsible organisations are already going down this route. They are trying to and I still think that most people want to be good. Okay, you know, you look at someone like a Coca-Cola, they're producing something that people want. Yeah, people want Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Now, it might not necessarily be the best thing for you, but you know, if you like everything, if it's in moderation, it tends to work. You know, I'm not having steak every day. I'll probably have a steak once every 3 weeks or something like that.
Okay.
I love it. And I probably have a Coke once every 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I do have it, I think, God, that's really nice. But actually, you realise that it's very sugary, it's quite acidic, etc., etc. People like these things, and therefore, again, you have to then persuade people not to have those things. But Coca-Cola as an organisation is probably trying to reduce its carbon, is trying to be more sustainable, try to use better packaging, etc. So those companies are trying to do, much bigger companies do see that, you know, there's this whole thing around ESG, environmental, societal governance, and effectively they are trying to do things better. Okay, and that's why if you look at financial companies and what they're trying to do around Scope 3 is their biggest issue. They're trying to look at who they should invest with and where the money should be used, etc. And they are beginning to go, right, we should be doing things that reduce carbon impact. But it's also, you know, government-based. Let's look at recycling. So recycling 20, 30 years ago was for tree huggers. It's like, I'm recycling. And people go, what the hell's this for?
Yeah, of course.
I've got a council now where we have boxes and I have 2 bins. So I can put all my things like grass cuttings, all my garden waste into one bin. We've got a bin which is for plastics, tin foil, bottles, whatever. So religiously put into there. And then I've got my paper and cardboard one. And that's all done. Now, 20, 30 years ago, we were all nutters for doing that. Now you're a nutter for not doing it. Okay, so there is definitely societal pressure. And I think going back to your question about we're the 1%, I think we should be out there doing it because actually you need people that are sort of pathfinders, you know, people that are
100%.
you know, guiding lights.
100%.
The difficulty is though, we consume too much carbon in this country. So I think somewhere per person in America is about 15 tons a year. Per person. We're about 8 tons. So we're better than America.
Of course,
but actually, if you look at developing nations and they're 1 or 2 tons.
You know what's
so
really weird?
You know,
you could use the word the Western world, but I never forget. Well, no, if you used the Scandinavian countries, right?
Yeah.
By culture, they use less carbon per person because they walk more, they run more.
Yep.
It's just part of their culture. Whereas, unfortunately, the Western culture that we're part of.
Well, the Scandinavians would say they are part of Western culture.
Okay,
or developed nation culture.
I'd probably say just more the cultural thing. Then let's look at the culture. The British culture, not to call us lazy as such, but we have had it better than most. I'd say the last 20 years as such. You know, we've got the freedom of driving. You know, I'd never walk. I personally wouldn't walk more than 10 minutes. You know,
Jacob, that's appalling.
But I live in the suburbs, and then I'll drive somewhere.
Yeah,
I don't unless you know I'll run more than 10 minutes on a treadmill. But
that's even right. Okay, and so he looks very fit, by the way, everyone. And can I just say, if he's going to a gym to run, I'm really going to be quite annoyed because why? Why do you? So dog walkers get in a car and they drive somewhere to then take their dog around the walk around. Just walk the dog. Okay? Seriously? Just walk the dog. You don't need to get in a car.
But you saying that, but looking at, I'd say the Scandinavian approach is they would just get out of the house and go for a walk.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, just for all the viewers, I can't do that because we're suburbs, then main road. So it's a case of I haven't got a dog. So for me, dog walking without a dog will be pretty weird.
You need a dog first.
I need a dog first.
Okay. But where is this podcast going, by the way?
So the culture is a big part with the people. So we as individuals need to use less carbon consciously and change our attitudes.
I think ultimately yes. Okay. And we go back to the recycling example. So when you go to an Airbnb, maybe for a holiday or something, and you go, right, I'm used to recycling. Like, what's the recycling here? So you might go to Spain in an Airbnb, and do they recycle? Do they not recycle? And then you feel bad about not recycling. Yeah. Now, can't obviously take it. Have you gone by plane or car though?
I'm waiting for you. Yeah, let's not go there. I know where you're going to go with that.
Yes.
Okay, so commercial buildings taking over in the UK. 60% of carbon is emitted by commercial buildings. So That's a fact.
Yeah,
So it makes total sense for commercial buildings
absolutely.
to absolutely look at reducing the carbon,
Yes.
hence where we are today with net zero. On a personal level, where people are like, load of rubbish, I'm not putting this in. On a personal level, it's more of an attitude adjustment.
I think companies are leading that to an extent. So, we're in a BREEAM building. So Brewdog's gone out there and said, right, we want it's a bit like the Co-op had a new headquarters made in Manchester.
Okay.
And that is totally BREEAM outstanding. I've been given a tour of it. It's amazing. And it feels amazing to be in it. So there are companies that are trying to do things in a better way, and they're trying to do things that make a difference. And I think most businesses that want to be around from a legacy or a long-term perspective will look at that and will try and do that because ultimately they're part of society. Look at the pandemic; it was really interesting. So we had events that we couldn't run, and I had partners, sponsors, and we had to postpone an event, and we didn't know when we were going to run it. Pretty much all of my big partners, sponsors, we said, don't take this the wrong way, but it'd be really nice if we could hold on to the money. Most of them have paid us. And we said, if you don't mind, can we hold on to the money and we'll do the event later? And they went, yeah, because they realised that we were a smaller company and the amount of money that effectively they'd given us wasn't much, but for us, it was really helpful. Just from a cash flow perspective.
Okay.
So I think companies out there do want to do the right things by companies. Now, there's a certain amount of we're expecting. So interestingly, we have certain suppliers that will say to us, what are you doing around your carbon impact?
Yeah.
And so we do report. So even though we don't have to do it from a government policy legislation perspective, we actually do have some companies that we supply who say, what are you doing around your carbon?
Okay.
So
nice.
And I think that's going to come more. So if you want to be part of a larger company's supply chain, you will be expected to have an idea of what you're doing around carbon and what you're doing to try and improve your carbon impact.
Gotcha. So just one question for you, because you mentioned it with the dog walking.
Yeah.
So have you got advice on anyone to reduce their carbon savings, just from your experience? Maybe commercial element. What seems to be the trend? What seems to be the trend that and you can sort of say, well, this is what you should be looking at doing.
Okay, so we go back to making it easy. Okay, lots of companies have done LEDs. Okay, and if you haven't done LEDs, then absolutely do LEDs. It's okay. So lighting might only be 10% of your energy use or 5%, but with LEDs you'll certainly cut it by that 5 or 10% will be cut by 70%.
Okay,
things
LEDs.
like LEDs. If you've got warehouses and roof spaces, oh my God, you've got to be looking at solar.
Okay.
It's almost especially with energy prices where they are. And if you can't afford to do the solar, look at finance options. There are finance options.
Okay.
If you've got HVAC units, if you can't afford to replace them, then there are definitely things for retrofit that you can put in.
So what we'd call like a bridging product, as in retrospect, it'd reduce your carbon and it's energy efficient and
Absolutely.
it's cost effective.
It's cost effective, absolutely. Okay. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. You're looking at, I don't know what a HVAC unit costs, but the units I'm seeing that can go in as a retrofit are probably costing with labour to install hundreds of pounds per unit.
It depends on the unit, the application, etc., etc. But there are in commercial buildings there are bridging products.
Yeah.
Some buildings, even government buildings, I know they're starting to lead by example, which is pretty cool. Most government buildings have got solar.
Yeah.
So they've gone solar. Now they're looking at removing gas. Not all buildings you can remove gas on, because you need space for air source products.
Yeah.
But there are bridging units.
Yeah.
Anything else snazzy that you've come across?
There's things around energy optimization, but that's more about you saving money rather than saving carbon. So if you're a manufacturing plant and you're using energy during the day, you might want to look at using it during the evening.
Interesting. Okay.
Because the energy price will be probably cheaper.
I see.
But the difficulty is then if you have to have people in, then you're probably paying them more because they're in at night time. So unsociable hours, etc. So again, you've got to look at it from a holistic point of view. I mean, people took out, halogen lights and put in LEDs, and what they found was they didn't get all of the return on investment because what they found is that there was no heat being produced because halogen lights used to produce heat. So, of course, then you had to up the boiler a little bit.
I think with a halogen light, I think halogen was 10% light, 90% heat.
Yeah, sort of.
Whereas
like
an LED
that,
is like 95% light, 5% heat. So you were making rooms colder.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's these things that, insulation as well as prime example. It's a simple thing. If you're a house owner, if you haven't got insulation, then you're an idiot.
So insulation. Going back to again the Tesla driving or an electric car, and then living with a really bad attitude of high waste, etc., etc.
If you've got the thermostat on at 25, what is the point? My thermostat is set at 18. I will come in and put it up, but that's when I'm around. So my house is pretty much basically if I go away, then I pretty much leave it so that if it goes under 18, and it has to be a really cold snap for it to go under 18. Okay?
Insulation, in my opinion, is one of the most underthought about things, even in commercial buildings.
Yes.
It's just not seen. It's just
and that's the problem. It's not seen.
Yeah, and it goes back to people educating, and then they can rely on the educated approach of the person telling them, etc., etc.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
I think that's enough, isn't it? God.
Yeah, we're done. We've got them all. We've got Geoff's top tips.
You've had my recommendation about the moonwalkers.
We have.
Now we had your top tips. And there are loads of other things out there. And if I knew that I had to do top tips, I would have probably come with my top 10.
Is there a trend with what you're seeing now? Is there anything new coming up? Like the net zero statement and the way people, we're talking energy. It's a growing sector. People, it's a space. But is there anything else that you're seeing now which wasn't there 1 or 2 years ago?
It's funny. We did an event late last year, and so there were the partners were either energy suppliers or they were data companies. So data's a really interesting thing.
Okay.
So if you can understand what's happening in your building or in your environment or whatever, it's a much easier thing to go, right, what do I do now? Okay. And that data is really granular. So you can actually so things like half-hourly data from an energy perspective enable you to sort of see where you're consuming.
I see.
Okay, so and that's I talked about energy optimization, about potentially moving your energy use. That's because of the data. It's been data-driven.
I see.
So there's a really cool little app for if you've got a smart meter at home. There's a thing called Hugo, which you can find on Google Play Store or the Apple one. It's a guy that I know, Ben. It's a really cool little tool.
What does it do?
It basically goes into your smart meter and it can show you graphically your use of energy day, week, yearly, monthly.
So if you're coming home and cooking, you've got your dishwasher running.
Absolutely, I'll show you all.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's really interesting.
Hugo, Hugo?
Hugo. Just a really cool, it's a free app to download, and you can do things like carbon offsetting if you want to do that.
Okay.
Let's not get started on that. We'll be have another 15 minutes of that. Look, carbon setting has its place, but ultimately it's not saving energy. You're just spending money to feel less guilty. Is my thought process.
I get you've got the you know more about it than me, so I'm gonna probably say what you know is probably what I'd agree with, because it seems to be that. So it allows you to act in a space because you're not feeling less guilty, because you're saying I'm paying a company to reduce my carbon.
Yeah. So the other thing is like, for instance, I said if you're a warehouse, put solar on top. First of all, probably look at your energy usage and see what you can, because you might be able to save 10% just on some simple things like people shutting doors,
of course,
putting insulation in. Then you do the solar after that, because if you put the solar in, you're just thinking, I can use more energy.
It's like to adjust the attitude. If the cost of electricity does go up again, that will then start becoming more apparent. Are we shutting doors? Because you'll need to pay someone to reduce your electricity, as an employee as such.
So I think the interesting thing is our energy price, right? So energy prices went right up. Mm-hmm. They're coming down slightly. I don't see them going back to, maybe for bigger businesses where it's a commodity, so you can use commodity type scenarios to help you buy it. But you have to be a large business. For smaller businesses and domestic users, our energy bills are going to stay high. They're not going to go back to where we were unless Putin decides to come out of Ukraine and decides to become the most peaceful man in the world. If Middle East conflicts all start to, we are in a very fragile place. So if Ukraine gets invaded properly, you can rest assured your energy prices are going right back up. Okay, so it's quite fragile. So they've come down a bit, but I don't see them going up. I don't see them going down to the levels we've had them.
Okay.
So get used to, in the winter, thinking of ways of getting used to a less temperate environment. Okay, or shut yourself in one room and put the radiator on, but then leave everything else cold. Okay, because when you go to sleep, you want to be a cold environment anyway, don't you? You don't want
and that's why we love air-to-air heat pumps, air conditioning.
I knew there's a pitch coming.
It is one of the most efficient ways because you can turn individual units on and off without having a boiler heating every room, and you do get some cooling in the summer. So if you've got an insulated house, your rooms will stay colder for longer. Right.
That's very good. That's a great finish. Well done.
Thank you, Geoff.
It's almost as if I set you up.
Thank you, Geoff. Thank you, Geoff. Thank you for being on the show.
No, it's been great. Thank you very much. I just get to be unfiltered. It's great.
I want to know what you've got an event coming up, which I think we're going to be involved with. We're going to get.
Yeah, I think we should have a chat about that. So we have a thing called the Big Zero Show. Big Zero Show is all about highlighting net zero in action, and it's on 2 days, July 2nd and July 3rd. If you go to www.bigzeroshow.com.
Yeah.
I don't think I need to spell that one out. It's pretty obvious. I know I don't talk very well, but bigzeroshow.com should be easy enough. You can go and register there. It's free to attend and a real great opportunity to see a lot of good content about how to put net zero into action. So day one's for businesses. Day two is for people that want to get into the industry. So the energy and net zero industry is, a lot of people don't think it's fun. It is fun and it's purpose-led, particularly now that we're going much more down a net zero route. So bigzeroshow.com, up at the Coventry Building Society Arena. So another plug for the Coventry Building Society. They're doing well. The M6, Junction 3, or you can get a train up to Coventry. And there's a little trammy train that goes to the stadium.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, thank you for the plug.
Perfect. Right, that's it on net zero. We've had 3 podcasts on this. If you haven't cracked it, perhaps the Big Zero Show event is the one to go to. I got that right.
That's great.
Like
Brilliant.
and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.